Hi, church. Perhaps if you read Christian publications, you've been reading a lot of things recently about the concept of lamenting or weeping or mourning or grieving with those who grieve. And I think that points us back to the verse in Romans 12, where Paul writes to the Romans that we are to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. That's verse 15. Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And we're often pretty comfortable with rejoicing with those who rejoice, especially in times of celebration. We are less comfortable with weeping with those who weep, and especially if we don't understand the weeping. And so I think sometimes as we're looking around at what's going on in our world and trying to make sense of things, we have a hard time weeping with those who weep because we don't share their experience. But I was thinking about this, and I've never personally had a miscarriage, but I can weep with somebody who has. I've never lost a child, but I can weep with somebody who has. I've never lost a parent, but I can weep with those who've lost a parent. I've never experienced the loss of a spouse, either through death or through divorce, but I can weep with those who have. I've never lost a family member in the line of duty, whether that's fire service, police service, armed forces, but I can certainly weep with those who have. I've never had a business fail, but I can weep with those who have. And I've never faced discrimination because of the color of my skin, but I should be able to weep with those who have. I don't need to have experienced what they've experienced. I don't even need to fully understand what they have experienced. I may not even feel like I get it at all. But if my brother or sister is weeping, Paul's command to us is to weep with those who weep. And in the context here, Paul isn't even talking about they're your best friend. He's talking about the body of Christ, where he tells us in verse 5 that we are members of one another. And so I want to call on all of us in our church family, whether we have experienced the types of discrimination, the types of fear that are being shared among our brothers and sisters who are people of color, whether or not we can fully understand it. What I'm going to say is that doesn't matter. We need to weep with those who weep. We need to not judge their experiences. We need to not try and explain away their experiences. We need to not tell them our sad stories, much like people often do when a woman is pregnant and they tell all of the horror stories that they have experienced. We don't need to say, I understand what you're going through, or I can imagine that's hard. We just need to weep with those who weep. Right now, we can't sit next to one another and put our arms around one another, but we can do that through a text. We can do that through an email. We can do that through a phone conversation. This is a time for weeping. There are sad things happening, and Paul calls us to weep with those who weep. So if we want to obey the first part of that verse and rejoice with those who have reason to rejoice, we are equally held accountable for the second part of that verse, to weep with those who weep. We have a God who is good, and we have a lot of reasons to rejoice and a lot of reasons to hope. But the Bible also says that there is a season for everything, a time for every purpose under heaven. And this seems like a time to spend some time weeping.